How a Horse Saved a Millionaire's Life. The shocking truth behind his decision not to board the plane. Have you ever wondered if a simple decision, something as small as turning back, could change your life forever? What if the one moment you thought was insignificant was, in fact, your only chance to survive? What if the fate you thought you had sealed for yourself was actually a mirage, and something, or someone, else had been trying to warn you all along? John Winters had everything. The kind of wealth that most only dream of. A sprawling estate perched on a hill that seemed to overlook the world itself. Private jets, fine suits, a life of luxury so perfect that it felt untouchable. People admired him, envied him, and most of all, they respected him. After all, he had built his empire from the ground up, with nothing but ambition and ruthless determination. Yet beneath the glossy surface, something was missing. He had everything, but he felt nothing. The lonely nights in his mansion, the empty halls echoing his every step, spoke louder than any of his achievements. It was as if, despite all the riches, John was adrift in a sea of success that had no real meaning. And the one companion who had been with him through all of it, the one constant in his life, was a horse named Thunder. But Thunder was more than just a horse to John. At least, that's what he told himself. Thunder was a tool, a symbol of his wealth, his status, a horse who looked impressive in the stables and on the racetrack. John never thought of Thunder as a companion, never truly stopped to see the bond between them. In his world, everything was a means to an end. But on that fateful day, Thunder would prove to John that there's more to life than what meets the eye. And what happens when you ignore the warning signs could be the most dangerous mistake of all. To the outside world, John Winters was the epitome of success. His mansion, perched atop a hill overlooking the bustling city below, was a sight to behold. Gleaming marble floors, towering windows that let in the light of the setting sun, and an endless view of the horizon. Everything about his life screamed affluence. His private jet was always ready, his phone constantly buzzing with business calls, and his calendar was packed with meetings, deals, and appearances. He was the kind of man who made things happen. John's wealth wasn't just about material possessions. It was a symbol of his power. People respected him. They had to. He was a self-made millionaire, someone who had clawed his way to the top with sheer grit and determination. Every acquisition, every victory in business felt like a stepping stone toward a life most could only dream of. And yet, for all his success, there was an emptiness within him, a void that no amount of money could fill. The problem was, John had spent so many years chasing wealth that he had forgotten the true meaning of happiness. His relationships were transactional, fleeting friendships with fellow millionaires, meaningless exchanges with staff who came and went, and hollow celebrations in his grand home. He had no real connections. And so, despite his vast fortune, John was alone. In the silence of his mansion, the glow of his achievements seemed to fade. His heart longed for something more, something deeper than the materialistic world he had built around him. But he refused to acknowledge it. He couldn't afford to. After all, admitting he was lonely would mean questioning everything he had worked so hard to create. But at night, when the mansion felt too big and the walls too empty, John could hear the subtle noise of Thunder's hooves in the stables. It was a small sound, but it reminded him that, even in his isolated world, there was someone who understood. But even then, Thunder was just a horse, wasn't he? Thunder had been with John for years, a gift from one of his business partners when he had won a major deal. At first, John had thought little of it. Thunder was a fine horse, strong, swift, and the perfect companion for the occasional show or racetrack appearance. He looked magnificent in the stables, a symbol of John's wealth and success. But that was all he was, a display, a living trophy to be admired by guests and clients. What John didn't realize, however, was that Thunder had been with him through more than just victories. Thunder had been there through the quiet moments, the lonely nights, when John felt as if the world was closing in on him. The horse had always been near, standing silently as though watching over him. It was a connection that John never fully understood. Thunder's steady presence, the way he would nudge his nose against John's shoulder when no one else was around. In the horse's eyes, John could see something that had been missing from his own life: loyalty, faith, and a bond that transcended wealth. Thunder wasn't just a horse, he was something far more precious. But it wasn't until the day that Thunder's strange behavior stopped John from boarding that fateful flight that John would realize just how deep that bond ran. He had never understood Thunder's unspoken language, but Thunder was about to teach him the most important lesson of his life. It started subtly, like a whisper that no one else could hear. At first, John dismissed it as nothing more than the horse acting up. After all, Thunder was known for his occasional stubborn streak. But over the course of a few days, something felt different. Thunder, usually calm and regal, began exhibiting behaviors that were completely out of character. One morning, as John walked out to the stables, he found Thunder standing by the gate, his head low and eyes locked onto him with an intensity that sent a shiver down his spine. The horse refused to move, his hooves rooted firmly to the ground. John, annoyed by the delay, tried to coax Thunder to follow him with a gentle tug on the reins. But Thunder wouldn't budge. The horse's eyes were wide with something John couldn't quite place. Was it fear? Concern? It was as though Thunder was trying to communicate something urgent, something that John couldn't understand. Over the next few days, Thunder's behavior grew stranger. He would nudge at John's arm whenever he was near, his gaze never leaving him for more than a second. He became more agitated when John headed toward his private jet, sometimes pawing at the ground, other times standing motionless, as if pleading for John to turn back. At night, Thunder would pace restlessly in the stables, unable to settle, as if he was waiting for something, or someone, to change the course of events. The bond between man and horse had always been there, but now it felt as though Thunder was trying to tell John something he couldn't yet understand. Despite the growing unease, John, as always, brushed off the signs. He was a man of logic, of reason, someone who believed in making decisions based on facts and numbers, not on feelings or superstition. Thunder's behavior, he rationalized, was just a phase. Maybe the horse was simply feeling a little off. After all, he had plenty of things to worry about: an important business trip to the city, an upcoming meeting with investors, and more plans to expand his empire. Just a horse being a horse, John muttered to himself, adjusting his suit jacket as he prepared to leave for the airport. Thunder's actions were strange, yes, but there was no time to dwell on them. It was just a minor inconvenience, a temporary distraction. But deep down, something in the back of his mind nagged at him, something he couldn't quite ignore. Why had Thunder been so persistent? Why had he acted as though John was about to make the worst mistake of his life? John tried to shake off the feeling, convincing himself that he was simply overthinking. But the unease lingered like a shadow, growing ever stronger with each passing hour. It wasn't until the morning of his flight that John began to truly feel the weight of the situation. Thunder's behavior had escalated overnight. As John approached the stable, he found the horse in a full-blown frenzy, pacing back and forth with frantic energy. His eyes were wide, almost wild, and he was letting out a series of whinnies that were unlike anything John had ever heard. Thunder seemed desperate. Desperate for John to stay. Desperate for him to listen. John's frustration grew. "Enough of this," he snapped, his patience wearing thin. He didn't have time for this nonsense. He had a plane to catch, a meeting that could potentially make or break his business. He was a millionaire for a reason, because he knew when to push forward, no matter the distractions. He grabbed the reins, ready to lead Thunder back to the stable and get on with his day. But just as he reached for the reins, something shocking happened. Thunder reared up, a powerful surge of energy in the horse's movements. For a brief moment, it felt as if the world stood still. John, caught off guard, stumbled back, eyes wide in surprise. It wasn't like Thunder to react this way. It was almost as though the horse was saying, "You're making a mistake. Don't go." John stood frozen, staring into Thunder's eyes. In that split second, the magnitude of the situation hit him. Thunder wasn't just behaving strangely. He was desperate. The look in his eyes was not that of a confused animal, but of a creature who understood something far beyond John's comprehension. For the first time, John wondered if this was more than just a coincidence. But still, the decision had been made. He was leaving, and nothing, not even the strange behavior of his horse, was going to stop him. As John turned to leave the stable, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. His mind raced, but there was no time to dwell on it. He had a flight to catch. And though Thunder's desperate calls echoed in the back of his mind, John Winters walked away, unaware that he was about to step into a fate that had been sealed long before he ever made the decision to board that plane. As John sat in the plush leather seat of his private jet, the hum of the engines beneath him provided a false sense of calm. The smooth takeoff had done little to alleviate the tension in his chest, but he was determined to focus on the business at hand. The familiar rhythm of the plane's ascent was a reminder that his world, though chaotic, was under control. But as they soared higher into the sky, something changed. The calm atmosphere in the cabin began to shift. The plane started to shake slightly, then more violently, as if the clouds themselves were angry. The usual turbulence of air pockets was nothing new, but this felt different. The plane was pitching and rolling in ways that didn't feel normal. The fasten seatbelt sign flashed on, and John felt his heart begin to race. He glanced out the window, seeing nothing but thick, swirling clouds. But, in his gut, he knew something was wrong. The unease he had brushed off back at the stables now seemed to come crashing back. It was as if every instinct inside him was screaming that this wasn't just bad weather. Something else was at play. Suddenly, the shaking intensified. The plane's engines sputtered, and a shrill sound pierced the cabin. Passengers gasped, and the flight attendants hurriedly moved to their seats. Panic began to rise. John's mind raced. Was this it? Was this the moment Thunder had tried to warn him about? His thoughts flashed back to the horse's frantic eyes, to the desperation in his movements. Thunder was right. I shouldn't have gone. But it was too late now. The turbulence became unbearable. The plane's wings shook violently, and John could hear the muffled sounds of metal groaning under the strain. He felt a rising sense of dread, as if the very world around him was about to come apart. His grip tightened on the armrest, his heart pounding in his chest. In that moment, all the wealth and power in the world felt meaningless. He wasn't in control anymore. The universe had other plans. In the chaos of the turbulence, John's thoughts drifted back to Thunder, back to the strange, almost prophetic behavior that had seemed so insignificant in the grand scheme of his life. The warnings, the desperate actions. Why hadn't I listened? The plane's descent was rapid, and John could hear the crackling of static over the intercom. "We're going down," the captain's voice echoed, trembling. In that horrifying instant, John realized that Thunder's actions hadn't been random. The horse hadn't been trying to stop him just because of some instinctual fear. Thunder had known something that John had been too blind to see until it was almost too late. The suffocating realization washed over him in waves. Thunder wasn't just acting out of fear or confusion. Thunder had known. Thunder had felt the danger. And in his own way, he had been trying to save John's life. The thoughts of the horse's desperate pleas, his frantic pacing, and his unnerving eyes all made sense now. Thunder hadn't been just a horse. Thunder had been a protector, a warning sign sent from beyond John's understanding. John closed his eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of his arrogance. The arrogance that had led him to ignore the signs, dismiss the warnings, and follow through with his plans without a second thought. In that split second, as the plane continued its terrifying plunge toward the earth, he understood. He had been wrong. The moment the plane hit the ground was nothing short of catastrophic. The deafening sound of metal tearing, the impact of the earth slamming into the aircraft, and the screaming wind were all he could hear. John was thrown from his seat, his body tossed around like a rag doll in the violent collision. The world seemed to explode around him, and for what felt like an eternity, everything was chaos. The plane's fuselage twisted and buckled under the force of the crash. There was fire, smoke, and the bitter taste of fear in the air. John's head slammed against the seat in front of him, and everything went black. When he finally regained consciousness, everything was eerily quiet. His ears rang, his head throbbed with pain, and his body ached all over. He slowly opened his eyes to a scene of devastation. The wreckage of the plane was scattered across the tarmac, and the familiar hum of the engines had been replaced with a haunting silence. But John was alive. Against all odds, he had survived. He could barely comprehend what had happened, but as the shock started to wear off and his mind began to process the chaos around him, one thought continued to dominate his mind. I should have listened to Thunder. In the days following the crash, John's life was forever altered. Though physically scarred, both by the crash and by the emotional toll it took on him, he was alive, and it was Thunder who had saved him. The realization of this hit him harder than anything he had ever experienced. The plane had crashed, the survivors had been few, but he had made it out, clinging to life. Once John was stable enough to leave the hospital, still in a daze from the trauma, he knew there was one place he needed to go. It wasn't to a boardroom or to a lawyer's office to handle the fallout from the crash. It was to the stables. The once grand home he had lived in now felt like a distant memory. All the material wealth, the luxury cars, the opulent mansion. It all seemed so trivial now. Nothing compared to the quiet power of the bond he had with his horse. John's steps were slow as he made his way to Thunder's stable, every inch of his being carrying the weight of gratitude, guilt, and awe. As he reached the barn, he stopped for a moment, taking a deep breath. There, in the soft glow of the afternoon sun, stood Thunder, the horse who had given him a second chance at life. Thunder's coat gleamed under the light, and the animal's posture was calm, as if he knew that his purpose had been fulfilled. John approached Thunder with quiet reverence, the deep connection between them palpable in the air. He hadn't been sure what to expect when he got here. Would Thunder even recognize him after everything? Or had the bond been severed by John's own arrogance and failure to listen? But the moment he stepped inside the stable, Thunder turned his head. His eyes met John's, and there it was. The same knowing look, the same unspoken understanding that had existed between them for years. It was in that moment that John understood, fully and completely, the depth of the bond they shared. Thunder wasn't just a horse. He had been a guide, a protector, and in many ways a mirror for John's own journey. Over the years, John had been so focused on his wealth and his empire that he hadn't stopped to appreciate the true value of the relationships in his life, including the one with Thunder. The bond they shared wasn't just about loyalty or companionship. It was a deeper connection, one built on trust, understanding, and a shared sense of purpose. Thunder had known John better than he had known himself. The horse had recognized something John hadn't seen, that the decisions he was about to make were dangerous, that something catastrophic was on the horizon. And yet, despite everything, Thunder had been there for him. He had protected him in ways John could never have expected. Standing in that stable, John let the weight of it all wash over him. The accident, the near-death experience, the moments of fear and panic, all of it had led him to this understanding. In his search for success, John had overlooked the things that mattered most: love, loyalty, connection. But now, it was all so clear. Thunder had been trying to teach him something all along. John reached out slowly, his hand trembling as it approached Thunder's mane. The horse leaned into his touch, as if to comfort him. Tears welled up in John's eyes, not from pain or loss, but from an overwhelming sense of gratitude. He had been given a second chance, not just at life, but at living with purpose. He whispered softly to the horse, his voice hoarse, barely above a whisper. "Thank you, Thunder. Thank you for saving my life." His words were simple, but they carried the weight of everything he couldn't express. Thunder had given him the most precious gift of all, the chance to start over, the chance to change his life for the better, to value the things that truly mattered. As John stood there, the bond between them stronger than ever, he made a silent promise. No longer would he take the people and creatures who loved him for granted. No longer would he chase after riches without considering the cost. He would live differently now, guided by the lessons Thunder had taught him. Lessons of love, loyalty, and the importance of trusting in what truly matters. The soft nicker of the horse, the feeling of his warmth, was enough to fill John's heart. He realized that this was more than just a rescue. It was the beginning of something new, a new life, built on the foundation of gratitude and respect for the gifts that life had to offer. John Winters had been saved, not just by the horse, but by the lesson that came with it. And now, he was finally ready to live with purpose, to embrace the deep connection he had with Thunder, and to honor the miracle that had given him a second chance. As the days passed, John's life slowly began to change. The weight of the crash, the lessons it had imparted, and the bond he now shared with Thunder all culminated in a profound shift in his priorities. No longer was he obsessed with climbing the corporate ladder, acquiring more wealth, or gaining more power. The things that once seemed like the most important goals of his life now felt empty, shallow. Instead, John found himself focusing on what truly mattered: relationships, loyalty, and the simple joy of living in harmony with the world around him. He began to invest more time in the people who mattered most, reconnecting with old friends and family members he had neglected in his relentless pursuit of success. Thunder, once just a horse to him, was now his closest companion, a constant reminder of the importance of staying grounded. John's world expanded beyond his business empire. He took the time to appreciate the beauty of life. Whether it was a quiet moment in the stable with Thunder, or a slow, contemplative walk through his garden. The things he had once taken for granted were now sources of deep gratitude and joy. The shift in priorities wasn't just about slowing down, it was about embracing life with intention and understanding that happiness doesn't come from the things you own, but from the love and connections you build. Thunder had shown him that, in the most dramatic way possible. John's relationship with Thunder evolved into something beyond a mere pet-owner dynamic. Thunder had saved John's life, yes, but the horse had also taught him the most valuable lesson of all, that true companionship goes beyond physical safety. It is about understanding, trust, and the unspoken bond that connects beings, no matter their differences. Every morning, John would make his way to the stable, where Thunder would greet him with a soft nicker and a gentle nudge. It was as if the horse knew that his role wasn't just to be a protector, but also to be a guide in John's journey of self-discovery. They spent hours together, not just riding, but sharing moments of peace and quiet reflection. Thunder, once just a symbol of luxury, had become John's anchor, a reminder of his past mistakes, the lessons he had learned, and the future he was now determined to live with integrity. Through their daily routines, John came to realize that Thunder's role in his life wasn't just to save him from a plane crash. Thunder had come into his life to show him how to live. How to live with purpose, humility, and love. In Thunder, John found not just a pet, but a true friend, a companion who had never once wavered in his loyalty, even when John had failed to see it. John Winters was no longer the man he had been before. The arrogance, the obsession with wealth, the disregard for the simple joys of life, all of that had been stripped away in the wake of the crash. What remained was a man who was humbled, grateful, and determined to live his life with intention. He knew that he would never be the same. The crash had been a wake-up call, yes, but it was Thunder who had truly shown him the path forward. It was Thunder who had saved him not just physically, but emotionally, who had pulled him out of a life that was centered on superficial success and into a life that was rooted in genuine connections. Now, when John looked out at his sprawling estate, it no longer felt like a symbol of success. It felt like a home, a place where love and loyalty could thrive, where Thunder would always have a place by his side. His focus had shifted from acquiring more to appreciating what he already had. The business empire was still there, but it no longer consumed him. John had learned to strike a balance, to live a life where his relationships and his connection with Thunder were just as important, if not more so, than his career. He was a changed man, and he owed it all to Thunder, the horse who had not only saved his life, but had shown him what it truly meant to live. As we close this incredible story of transformation, we want to hear from you. John's journey with Thunder shows us the profound impact that animals can have on our lives, sometimes in ways we never expected. Whether it's a life-changing experience or a moment of quiet companionship, we all have stories of how our pets have touched our hearts. We invite you to share your story in the comments below. Have you ever had a moment where your animal showed you something that changed your life? Whether it's a heartwarming moment or something that made you see the world in a different light, we want to hear how your connection with your pet has shaped who you are today. If you've been inspired by John and Thunder's story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. When we share these beautiful stories, we not only celebrate the bond between humans and animals, but also create a community of people who understand the life-changing power of love and loyalty. So, share your thoughts, engage with others who may have had similar experiences, and join us in continuing to spread these incredible stories of companionship and transformation. We're all part of this journey, and together we can make the world a little bit more compassionate, one story at a time. Remember, the story doesn't end here. It's just the beginning. We look forward to hearing from you, and thank you for being part of our community.